Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. Earlier this year, the Center for an Urban Future, supported by the Bronx Community Foundation, issued a report called 50 Ideas for a Stronger and More Equitable Bronx. It's a fascinating blueprint that presents ideas from some of the borough's most influential community leaders on how to, in plain language, build and improve the Bronx. Tonight, we're going to review some of those ideas with the visionary leaders of both of these organizations and hopefully not only inspire some thinking on how we can all partner in the development of our hometown, but also examine how to turn those thoughts and ideas into action. So please join me in welcoming back to Bronx Talk the former chancellor of the city schools, but currently the president and CEO of the Bronx Community Foundation, Dr. Meisha Porter. Always nice to have you.
It is always good to be here, Gary.
Well, so we have joy in the room. And the Editorial and Policy Director of the Center for an Urban Future is Eli Dvorkin. Mr. Dvorkin, nice to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Porter, let's start with you. So you were on the program in September.
Yeah.
You were on the program in September. And you talked about these visioning sessions. Is what we're talking about today like the next step from those visioning sessions?
So this is past the visioning. So we were really excited. CUF did a citywide report and then reached out to us to say, we're doing this across boroughs. And we were super excited and we're like, how can we do this? And how can we make sure the Bronx comes out first? And so the ideas are what we talk about all the time, I think, when I come here, Gary, which is the ideas to improve and move the Bronx are already here. They're within the people in this borough. They're within the leaders in this borough.
Don't I know it? I'm smiling.
You have some of those ideas, Gary.
I sit here every week.
And so this was really an opportunity to elevate those ideas and position them in this report, and also bring those leaders and their voices to the forefront. And so we're really excited about this report. It's one of the things that I am most proud of that we've done this year, and we were really excited to have a great partner like CUF help us do it.
One of the phrases I pulled out of some of the materials that Eli and his group put together, it says it will be nearly impossible to create a more equitable economy in New York without putting the Bronx at the forefront.
Yes.
Why do you believe that?
So, I mean, I believe, and I've said this over and over again, that absolutely we need to bring New York City back. We're back in so many ways, right, post-pandemic. But the idea of really investing in communities that have experienced historic disinvestment is critically important. And I think I've shared this with you before. I grew up in all of those neighborhoods. I was born in Far Rockaway. I was raised in South Jamaica, and I moved to the Bronx when I was 17. And the Bronx as a borough has historically felt that disinvestment, where across the city we have neighborhoods, but not a borough. And so when I think about moving the city forward, it's about investing in the places of greatest disinvestment so we can lift those communities up and lift our great borough up.
That is actually a wonderful explanation of, number one, the history of where we were, where we are, and where we, of course, would like to go. What would you, and before we get to Mr. Dvorkin to really get into the nuts and bolts of it, what would you need to see ultimately so that you could look back and say, oh, that was good. That was a success. We did a good job with that.
I mean, I think it is, the foundation exists to bring a new level of investment to the borough as well. And I think to create this kind of report from the people, similar to the engagement we did over the summer, and to begin to use our resources to activate those ideas. To me, that would be success, to be able to bring resources to activate the ideas that have come out of this report, that have come out of our engagements. That's why we exist. That's why there's a Bronx Community Foundation.
And to take the dis off of disinvestment.
Exactly.
Mr. Dvorkin, let's talk with you. Let's talk about process. How did you select who would have input? Did you go, ladies and gentlemen, anybody want to have it? Because to do that in the Bronx, everybody's going to have something to say. We have 1.4 million people and you have 35 million opinions. So how did you find the people who ultimately were represented in the report?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Well, I think, first of all, we were just so compelled by the idea that the solutions to many of the greatest challenges facing the Bronx are right here in the Bronx. You know, we knew that we wanted to talk to Bronx leaders to get their ideas. And our starting point was not only that those solutions are here, but that we needed to really reach a representative cross-section of all of the strengths that the Bronx has to offer. So we talked to cultural leaders, faith-based leaders, leaders of community-based organizations, folks that are focused on economic development, workforce development, supporting young adults and children, educators, all of these parts of the Bronx's society and culture and economy. We wanted to make sure we couldn't talk to everybody, but we needed to talk to folks that covered that broad cross-section of different strengths in the Bronx. And I think this is another key point, or a starting point for the research, was that, so many of the conversations about the Bronx start with all the negatives. They're really based around the lacks, the absence of things, what isn't working.
Don't we know it?
And you heard these conversations on your program probably for the last 30 years, right? But we thought as a starting point, we actually want to begin with some of the great strengths in the Bronx. Not only those individuals and the organizations that they represent, the fact that the Bronx is full of such incredible cultural vitality. We've got amazing anchor institutions, more parks than any other borough here. There's so many aspects of the Bronx that are real strengths. And I'd say maybe the most important one in some senses right now is that the Bronx is where New York City's working class and middle class can actually still afford to live. It's gotten a lot harder. Incomes have increased much slower than the cost of rent in the Bronx. But if we want to have a city that works for everybody, in so many ways, we're actually going to have to prove that that works in the Bronx. That's where it's possible. So we really started with a kind of an optimistic view. Now, the challenges are real. The Bronx deals with the highest poverty rates in New York City. Those poverty rates declined a little bit in 2020, 21. They're going back up. We've got deeply entrenched pockets of poverty we have to confront and deal with. Digital equity issues that abound. I mean, the highest rates of disconnection from broadband and the internet are right here in the Bronx.
I think that what people will see when they see the name, because we're going to put some of these ideas up on the screen, people will recognize the name and say, oh, that's the person I see in my library, or that's the person I go to when I go to my community center.
And by the way, Gary, it's not too late we could do a new edition with a 51st idea. If you've got one, you got to let us know.
If I've got one, goodness gracious, I've sat in this seat for long enough. Did you have a forum and you said, all right, everybody in the same room? Did you call people individually? Did you do this kind of thing?
So we did a lot of initial conversations, speaking with Dr. Porter and her
I'm
team.
assuming that their resources came
Absolutely.
into
We
play.
wanted to really start with, understanding, who should we be talking to? And of course, over, 30 years of our organization as well, we've got a lot of deep connections and relationships in the Bronx. But we definitely started with some really deep engagement around who should we be talking to. A lot of folks said, hey, I may not be the person with the idea, but here's who I think you should talk to. So we did a lot of digging to really figure out who we should even be talking to in the first place. From there, we kind of assembled, I think, a really representative mix. It was intentionally diverse in every conceivable way, not just in terms of background or origin, but their position in the Bronx, geographically, even within the Bronx, their sectors, their areas of influence and interest. So we really did a lot of work there.
How long a process was this to do this?
I mean,
don't ask.
From initial
30
idea,
years that I've been doing this show.
No, but it took the better part of a year, really.
I'm sure it did.
Finish. Yeah,
I'm sure it did. One of the things that comes out there, since the pandemic, no other borough has experienced a bigger spike in new business formation, and many of these new entrepreneurs have clear potential for growth. That's a quote out of the report. Talk about the positives. We hear about disinvestment, we know about the poverty, we know about our health issues, but there still is, kind of a good side to this. To what we're doing.
And the report is so positive, right? This is the thing that I think is so exciting about the report and exciting about the approach we take at the foundation. We really start with the assets of the borough, right? We know what the issues are. We start with the assets because, you have to know what you have in order to know what you want to grow. And the ideas are really solutions, right? And so when you read the ideas,
which we're going to do in a moment.
Yes.
Okay.
When you read the ideas, you hear folks addressing a problem through a solution, which is a different way and a different perspective to approach a problem. And so for me, the conversations around digital equity, around workforce and youth development, education and affordability really offer the city and our electeds and our investors a pathway to solve problems that we've been grappling with for a long time. And so I'm really proud of the asset-based approach that this report takes into problem solving.
And it was almost as if I needed to be reminded, and I've been there. Have you been to the Children's Museum?
Oh my
Do we
God.
know how amazing it is?
Yes,
And of course, we're getting the Hip Hop Museum, which is, we fueled the world with it. So let's take a look. We've got some some of the particular subjects. Digital equity was one of the biggest topics in there. 10 of the 50s, that's 20% of the 50, were about digital equity. We put them on the screen. There are all kinds of things. Create a digital equity plan for the Bronx. Who wants to talk about digital equity? You want to?
Sure, I can definitely start.
Sure.
Definitely.
By the way, I appreciate the quick math as a teacher. I'm very proud of you.
Okay, well, let's be clear. It's all Bronx formatted. It was DeWitt Clinton High School and Lehman College. Go ahead.
So credit where it's due, but
who wouldn't? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I think, revealing that it wasn't like we initially went into the process thinking we need to talk to 10 people that are going to have an idea about digital equity. It was so clear through the research that this is just absolutely one of the key issues in the Bronx today. And so the fact that so many ideas address digital equity is really a reflection of how important this issue is. I'm really struck by a couple of things in terms of the ideas themselves. I mean, certainly the idea of some longer-term strategic planning came up again and again. It can't just be, I think this was a theme throughout, can't just be kind of piecemeal solutions or one-offs. There's a real consensus and a desire for a plan that actually takes into account, as Dr. Porter was saying, all of the assets that are already here, and there are dozens of organizations in the Bronx working on digital equity issues, and builds on those strengths. And we could talk about a couple of how the ideas fit in with that.
Here's something that's so interesting to me, and that's in this digital equity thing. Expand access to affordable internet for all Bronxites, not only NYCHA residents. Now, we know that, because there's an effort now to make sure NYCHA gets wired, it would be a mistake to assume that's the only place we have a digital divide.
That's right.
And I'm sure you would know it, having been the chancellor during a time when kids were trying to go to school on iPads. So you want to just talk about the needs and how you saw it grassroots with families?
Yes. So first of all, digital equity is a programmatic priority for the foundation. So watch for more from us on that, because we know it's so important. And, up to 40% of Bronxites don't have access, which, to your point, is not just about NYCHA.
It makes me cry.
It's
really,
infrastructure,
it's just so
right?
sad.
And so, for the Bronx to compete in the 21st century economy, we have to deal with the access issue, but we also have to position Bronxites to be a part of the innovation stories, right? And so access is just the first step. Access and then digital literacy, right? And then how do we use new technologies, right? Free and accessible broadband is just a basic right that needs to be in place for all Bronxites.
And Natasha Green, who is with Hidden Gems Archery, and We Intervene, said that we need to require digital literacy training for all city employees.
Yes.
And actually you put the iPod or iPad in somebody's hands, or, you give them access to, Wi-Fi or whatever it is, they still have to know how to operate it. And especially in the Bronx, people who come from other places.
Yep. Right. And it's not just about the connectivity is the first step, but the literacy, not only for city workers, but also for our nonprofit community, right? Ensuring that we have access to new technologies in the ways in which we're working.
So in order to do this, and this is going to apply to everything we look at, and I'll ask both of you the same question, it's going to require dollar bills, because if you're talking about infrastructure of any sort, that's going to be dollar bills. And a lot of that means legislative support. Mr. Dvorkin, you want to just talk about turning this into a discussion in the city council and a discussion in the state legislature?
Yeah, absolutely.
We got to get there because, we want to bring in the dough.
100%. I mean, I think part of it is there's almost kind of universal consensus at how severe an issue this is, and I think the pandemic just made it that much more clear. The digital equity gaps in our city became equity gaps in every other sense, in terms of access to healthcare and education, tech training, workforce development, the list goes on. But where there's so much less consensus, let alone any real kind of specific clarity around next steps, is, well, what do you do about it? So absolutely new investment is going to be needed, and at a pretty enormous scale. I mean, when you talk about the connectivity piece, and generally, and I think the ideas in the report reflect this, there's kind of two ways to go about it, and I would say both are needed. One is more subsidies to make internet more affordable, and the other is actually investing in the infrastructure to build more connectivity into our physical environment, and both are needed, but both are expensive.
To me, now you have a piece of paper you can put on somebody's desk and say, look, this is what they're saying. You want to be responsive. That's what you got to do.
Well, Gary, let me say one other thing about that, too, because the other thing that strikes me about some of the digital equity ideas is the opportunity to scale up things that are already working.
Yes.
So one idea that really jumped out at me was this idea around New York Public Library, which operates the public libraries in the Bronx, offers more digital literacy training than any other institution in New York City. But the challenge or the opportunity, frankly, that one of our contributors put forward was, let's invest in enabling the New York Public Library here in the Bronx to offer its incredibly effective digital literacy and introduction to coding classes in other languages
This
besides
goes
English.
back to what Dr. Porter said. It's already here.
Yep.
Exactly.
Let's do it right. I want to talk about workforce and youth development. Michelle Avila, who's the health chair at Community Board 7 and Assistant Director of Public Policy at Children's Aid, talked about summer youth employment and making it a all-year youth employment. I thought that was brilliant. That why do kids have to or young people have to wait till summer
That's right.
to get a paid job? You want to talk?
Listen,
you're familiar with the young
yes,
people in the Bronx.
That is, again, one of my favorite ideas, this idea around creating, and I think, again, we're positioned for that. New York City Public Schools has taken a position around career pipeline work. And so why not create a program where young people are earning dollars for the work that they're doing, but also learning and getting an entry point into career opportunities. And so it's
you know, we have some of the summer youth employment come here, and I'm thrilled to have them. And certainly they learn from me. They learn from our wonderful technical staff. And I know it's a valuable experience,
Yes.
whether they go into television or media or not, but they're out here in the world, and after being cooped up for 2 years.
Absolutely.
We got to get them outside. Did you want to add anything to the idea of workforce
Absolutely.
development?
I mean, I think on the SYP idea, which I also love, you know, I think the administration, the mayor deserves great credit for expanding summer youth employment in New York City, you know, to over 100,000 young people. But I think this idea gets at the heart of what more is needed, which is that if this is just a 6-week experience, often disconnected from the students' actual emerging interests, then it doesn't really fulfill the vision of being career connected.
Right.
It's an important step along the journey, but it's not as much of an impact as you'd see if it was a year-round program actually aligned with the young person's developing interests in terms of careers and opportunities.
So we'll take a quick vote here at the table. Let's eliminate the S in front of summer youth employment. Just call it the youth employment program.
That's right. Yes.
And then and there we go. Okay. Let's talk about the education, and you know where I'm going to turn for that. Develop a multi-year plan. This is from Sarah Johnson, who's the CEO at the Teaching Lab. Develop a multi-year plan to get every Bronx student to read on grade level. Now, we know that the new chancellor, Chancellor Banks, has rewritten some of the literacy policies. How does this get implemented, or what do we need to do to do this?
Literacy is a community issue, right? It's not just a school building issue, right? And so if we want to build a literate society, we have to make sure that that literacy is something that everybody's a part of. And so, I mean, I think there are so many ways to think about this. I think it is when where students are after school and how literacy plays a role in that. You know, we have barbershops that have bookcases and barbers who are reading to young people. And so let's make reading and literacy fun and exciting. And more importantly, let's make sure that young people are seeing their stories, right? That's so important. There's so many stories about the Bronx, about the diversity of young people and the diversity of our community. And so, you know, one of the things that I, as an English teacher by trade, also believe that the literacy story is also about seeing yourselves reflected. And that opens the door to read more and more. And so
here's Gary's point of view. You wanted the 51st idea?
Yes.
We have the New York Yankees in the borough.
Yes.
Have the kids learn math by doing the batting averages.
Yes.
Now the analytics are out there. I can't even figure them out. If you could have people teach the kids, did you see the game last night? They're playing down your block, and you know you saw Aaron Judge. How many home runs does he hit a year on the average? That's, to me, that's what you want to do. So I want to put in there, let them use professional sports. The Knicks have been playing better. Let the kids do Jalen Brunson's shooting percentage, you know, and how do they determine that? How do they, you know?
You know, if the Yankees wanted to put together a paid, you know, youth apprenticeship program and baseball analytics, I think that would be a great idea.
Talk to your friend over here.
I think our friends at the Yankees would be happy to be a part of this story for sure.
Anyway, I couldn't resist bringing it up. It's something that I've been thinking about. The last thing we're going to review, and there are 50 ideas here, and you should really check it out on your own, affordability. If you talk about housing in New York City, or you open up every newspaper, it's among the leading issues. So let's see, the biggest thing is the word affordability.
Yep.
What is affordable? Sheila Garcia, Yoselin Gomez, and Joanne Grinnell from New Settlement said, why not recalculate the median income to ensure the newly built affordable housing is actually in reach for more Bronx residents? How many times have I heard that? What are your thoughts about affordability, and what did you hear from people about affordability?
Well, there's, complete consensus that New York City's affordability crisis is maybe the biggest challenge we face, and you're feeling it right here in the Bronx. Like I mentioned earlier, rents in the Bronx have risen much faster than income. So even though the Bronx may be more affordable than other boroughs, the affordability gap is widening. And I think that's part of what that idea is getting at. And absolutely, recalculating area median income, which encompasses the whole region, would really benefit the Bronx specifically, where median incomes are much lower than the region overall.
How do you standardize that? I mean, AMI, I guess you've got to go to real estate organizations. Is this legislation?
Well, this is something that federally is done by Housing and Urban Development. So this is something a change that the city and state can push for, that ultimately would have to come from the federal level. But I will say within that idea, I think is another related idea, which is the city doesn't have to wait to target investments to support the creation of deeply affordable housing at levels that Bronxites can afford. And so I think the complement to this idea is absolutely recalculating AMI would help. It would help us incentivize putting dollars where they're needed the most to generate the type of housing that New Yorkers need, that Bronx residents need, but the city and the state don't have to wait on the federal government to do that.
Then can I just add a second idea connected to that is from Christina Hansen, Executive Director of Parts of the Solution, around expanding the window for households with new income. Like, give folks a moment to breathe, right? Before we say your income went up 10%, your rent goes up 10%, right? And so this idea of, like the ability to save and generate wealth happens because you stabilize bills as your income grows. Because you've worked hard enough
to get to that point.
Yes.
And this is a really important idea.
It's funny because I read that and I didn't think much of it. But you're right. That, again, look at how people live and how people have to live.
Yes.
And if they want to improve themselves, all of a sudden the rent will go up. We finally did it. We paid off our credit cards. We did whatever we had to do. And now you
absolutely. It's just such an important idea. It is one of the wonkier ideas, but it's really worth spending a second on, because ultimately a lot of our policies in this area disincentivize steps that people take to achieve self-sufficiency. And we're going about that completely wrong. And this is not just about housing, but this is also true of all sorts of other benefits. And ultimately the idea here is really something like an income disregard. Allow folks to maintain the benefits that they're receiving that they were originally eligible for as they pursue education, training, opportunities to start businesses and generate more income, so that you don't immediately fall off a cliff when your income rises just a little bit.
And just a real life. Last week I was in a school talking to a paraprofessional who's doing arts programming with kids. And I said to him, I'm gonna make you a teacher. We're gonna, and you know what he said to me? He said, I live in public housing. I can't afford to be a teacher. If
he lived anywhere in New York City and wants to be a teacher, I don't even want to hear it. Listen, we're going to run it. We can do all 50, but we'll run out of time. Were you surprised at anything that you heard, or was it really like, well, finally somebody articulated what we've been thinking about?
I think it was that, and I think it was less surprise and just more pride around this borough, around the ideas that exist in this borough, and again, this idea and belief that you and I hold so deeply, that the answers are in this borough. And so let's really listen to what people are saying.
Right. And for you, any surprises?
Yeah, I would say less surprise than delight. But I think also a real recognition that, these innovative thinkers in the Bronx are really sophisticated in their approach to what would work. So there were big and bold and visionary ideas. There were also really practical, specific ideas like the one we just described. And there were ideas that I thought, if they were implemented at scale, could be totally transformative, but that they were presented in a really thoughtful way to say, hey, there's even some initial steps that could be taken that would be in of themselves effective and that could prove a model out that would allow for, further support and investment for good ideas to grow.
The Center for Urban Future, talk to me about what you're doing next.
Yeah, so we're really excited. We've got a lot of research on deck. We're excited to continue with some of this work right here in the Bronx. We're hopefully going to be doing new work around solving for some of the digital equity gaps in the Bronx. We've also got
I'm
some more.
hoping you're going to be knocking on doors with this report and saying, "Hey, look what we did. You better." Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but I would say we're here at Lehman College. I should just put in a plug or a shout out. We're doing a lot more research than we have for many years around strengthening CUNY's key role as an engine of economic mobility. So take a look for some new research.
I just read an article by the chancellor of CUNY who was talking about the importance of the community colleges in our whole structure. I have to ask you about the gala, right? That's what you wanted to talk about. We're going to put it up on the screen.
Yes, June 5th.
June 5th. This is the first one.
We are so excited.
They're getting older.
We're getting older.
Up.
We're growing up. We're getting into gala season, but we're really excited. There are going to be a bunch of announcements, but I can tell you we're so excited. Sunny Hostin, a Bronxite, is going to be our host for the evening, and we're honoring our first honoree this public is Leon Cooperman.
I saw
who
that
wrote
this
the book
morning
From
in my
the Bronx
email.
To Wall Street, and so we are super excited about this, and we're also just on the report in the fall. With CUF, we're going to partner to celebrate the ideas more publicly with the authors. So,
do you see this? I mean, we've been involved in the dialogue since really the formation of the Bronx Community Foundation. Do you see this report as really a central thing? In other words, all the dialogues we've had here and even privately have been about these ideas, and now here it is. You must feel pretty good about that.
I feel really good, and I'm so proud that we got to do this with CUF. I'm even prouder of the partners who came to the table with their ideas and said, "Let's do this together."
What's next? What you got something next other than the gala?
Other than the gala, we have an event that we're going to do in the fall to celebrate the report and highlight some of the ideas. So look for that. I'm really excited about that. And you're gonna hear more about our programmatic work in digital equity because that came clear from this report that's an area for a priority for the borough.
We need you. We need you, and we're thrilled that you did this report. Thank you so much, Dr. Meisha Porter.
Thank you.
And Eli Dvorkin. Me of all people should get that right. But thank you so much, really, for this is just a really important thing. And we'll thank everybody. We thank our producer is Rebecca Hemick. Our director is Will Guzman. Our editor for Bronx Talk is Yenelsida Diaz. And we can't forget about the cast of thousands who work with us here in the studio. And of course, to you too, the people of the Bronx. So if the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, yes, we'll see you next week. Good night.